The twin moons hung low and blood-red over the barren plains of Vor 9, casting long, twisted shadows across the rocky outcrop where the battered alien soldiers had gathered. The cold seeped into their thick carapaces, but no one dared move close to the fire. It flickered weakly, the only source of light in the endless dark, its orange glow trembling against jagged stone. Kael'thar sat hunched forward, the scars on his face twisting as he stared into the flames. His six-fingered hands trembled slightly as he clenched his rifle's grip, the ancient weapon rattling softly in the silence. Around him, the younger Voran soldiers waited, eyes wide, breaths held. This was no ordinary story. Kael'thar's voice, rough and low, sliced the silence like a blade. "You think your wars are brutal? Your conflicts savage?" he began, voice dry like dust scraping against stone. "You have no idea what it means to fight humanity." The soldiers shifted uneasily. To most in the galaxy, humans were a primitive species, aggressive, chaotic, but ultimately limited. Easy prey for an organized empire like the Voran. But Kael'thar was different. He had seen what those so-called primitives were capable of, and he had survived. "I was there," Kael'thar said, his eyes narrowing as the firelight caught the fresh scars across his neck and forearms. "When our forces first touched down on Lithar, a jungle moon thick with poison vines and deadly beasts, we expected an easy victory. We expected humans to scatter like frightened rodents, but instead..." He let the silence stretch. His comrades leaned in, the night growing heavier around them. Instead, they fought like demons born of the jungle itself. Kael'thar's memory flickered back. The dense, choking canopy of Lithar, so dark it swallowed the sunlight whole, the sharp crack of gunfire echoing like thunder through the trees. The screams, not of fear but of fury. "They didn't wear shining armor or march in perfect lines," he said. "They moved like shadows, striking from nowhere with knives, clubs, and strange machines that spat fire and metal. Their war cries shattered our ranks, made our soldiers hesitate. For the first time, I saw true terror in the eyes of a Voran warrior." The younger soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Voran warriors were bred for war. They had faced countless foes across the stars. But humanity was different, savage, unpredictable. Kael'thar's voice grew darker. "They set traps, not just simple pits or mines, but living snares. Vines laced with poisons, pits filled with spikes soaked in toxins that burned flesh from bone. They turned the jungle against us." He paused, swallowing thickly. "Our unit lost half its men in the first week, not to weapons or tactics, but to pure, brutal savagery. They didn't fight for glory or conquest. They fought for survival and vengeance." The fire popped suddenly, sending a cascade of sparks into the black sky. Kael'thar's eyes seemed to catch every flicker, haunted by memories that refused to fade. "I remember Corporal Mirak, a strong Voran, proud and fierce. We found him trapped under a fallen tree after a skirmish, bleeding and weak. We thought the humans would spare him, but no. He spat into the dirt. A human girl, no older than 10, stood over him with a crude blade. She looked at him, not with fear, not with mercy, but with the cold, calculating hate of a hunter. The camp fell silent. Even the distant howls of the native predators seemed to hush in respect for the story. She whispered something in their broken tongue. Then with one swift motion, she ended him." Kael'thar's voice cracked. "I have never seen such cruelty from any warrior, no matter how fierce. But it was not mindless. It was a message." The younger soldiers looked at one another, wide-eyed and uneasy. "Humanity does not forgive. Humanity does not forget. Humanity fights like the wild itself, relentless, brutal, and without mercy." Kael'thar shifted, his eyes scanning the horizon where the first hints of dawn began to glow faintly behind the jagged mountains. "I survived because I learned to fear them, to respect their savage will. And because their wars were not fought, like ours. They fought to burn every last one of us out." A long, heavy silence stretched over the group. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows that seemed to dance with ghosts from distant, blood-soaked battlefields. Kael'thar's gaze hardened. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly. "If you ever meet humanity in the stars, remember this. They are more than savages. They are the nightmare you never saw coming." The alien soldiers sat in stunned silence, the weight of Kael'thar's words sinking deep into their bones. And far beyond the campfire's weak light, the first stars of a new day blinked cold and unfeeling in the dark. The moment Kael'thar and his squad set foot on Lethar, the jungle seemed to close around them like a living, breathing beast. The air was thick with moisture and the stench of decay, tangled vines hanging like serpents ready to strike. The Vorin, trained in cold precision and discipline, expected an easy fight against what they had been told were primitive humans. They were wrong. Within minutes, the first trap detonated beneath them. The ground exploded with a violent roar, sending shards of metal and splintered wood flying. Kael'thar was thrown violently into a tree, his side ripping painfully as the impact knocked the wind from his lungs. Around him, soldiers screamed, some caught in the blast, others caught unawares by a second wave of attackers. Emerging from the shadows like ghosts were the humans, gaunt figures draped in scavenged armor, faces smeared with dirt and war paint, eyes wild with rage. They moved not in formation, but as a swarm of furious predators, striking from every direction with jagged blades, makeshift rifles, and twisted ingenuity. Kael'thar fired his weapon desperately, heart pounding. The humans' war cries echoed. Through the thick canopy, fierce and haunting like a chorus of hellish spirits. They didn't fight like soldiers. There was no rhythm, no order. They fought with raw fury, like the wild itself had taken form in them. A human man, his face scarred and twisted in a snarl, charged Kael'thar with a crude but deadly blade. Kael'thar barely blocked the blow, the metal ringing against his rifle stock. The man grinned with savage delight, eyes burning with unyielding hatred. "We are the jungle," he spat. "We survive. We kill. We burn." Kael'thar felt an icy knot tighten in his gut. This was no mere enemy. It was a force of nature. The battle was a nightmare of shifting shadows and sudden death. Hidden tripwires triggered explosives that tore through armor and bone. Poison-tipped darts flew silently from concealed blowguns, striking without warning. The air was thick with screams and the metallic scent of blood. One of Kael'thar's comrades fell into a pit lined with spikes coated in a neurotoxin so potent it paralyzed him instantly. Kael'thar could only watch in horror as the man convulsed, eyes wide with terror before death claimed him. The humans vanished as quickly as they struck, disappearing into the dense jungle like wraiths. They were relentless, hunting with cunning and cruelty. As Kael'thar scrambled to regroup, a small figure stepped from the shadows, an eerie calm in the midst of chaos. It was a girl, no more than 10, her eyes cold and sharp as obsidian. In her hand gleamed a crude dagger, its edge stained dark. "You don't belong here," she whispered, voice steady, almost eerily calm. Kael'thar froze, the dagger's edge inches from his throat. For a heartbeat, he saw not a child, but a predator, forged by endless war. Before he could react, she vanished into the gloom. That moment haunted Kael'thar long after the screams faded. The jungle itself seemed to conspire against the Vorin, each step a treacherous gamble. Poisonous plants, aggressive fauna, and ever-present. Human traps turned every inch of terrain into a deadly gauntlet. The night was filled with whispers and distant howls. Kael'thar's squad, fractured and bloodied, staggered through the darkness, hunted relentlessly. They lost many that night. Only a few limped back to the Vorin base, carrying stories of horror and a grudging respect for their savage enemy. Kael'thar's report to the commanders was grim. "They are not barbarians," he warned, voice low but resolute. "They are the jungle. They fight with a fury born of desperation. They know no mercy, no surrender." The commanders exchanged uneasy looks, the weight of Kael'thar's words sinking in. This was not a battle of armies. It was a war for survival, fought with the savage, relentless heart of humanity itself. The Vorin fleet descended upon Carthos Prime, expecting a swift and decisive victory. The humans were trapped on their homeworld now, their forces scattered and depleted after months of guerrilla warfare on countless moons and outposts. The Vorin High Command predicted the siege would last weeks at most, but Karthos Prime had other plans. Kael'thar remembered the first glimpse of the planet from orbit, sprawling cities shattered by war, smoke rising in angry columns from burning districts, and glowing red patches where forests had been scorched to ash. Yet beneath the devastation pulsed a stubborn heartbeat of resistance. The invasion force landed amidst ruins and rubble, but the humans did not flee. They swarmed from the shadows, armed with scavenged weapons, makeshift explosives, and raw hatred. Kael'thar's unit was assigned to secure the district known as New Barris, a sprawling urban wasteland riddled with collapsed buildings, twisted metal, and labyrinthine alleyways. It was a death trap. The humans knew every inch of their ruined city like a hunter stalking its prey. As Kael'thar's squad moved cautiously through the rubble, a sudden explosion threw them off their feet. A wall of fire erupted, sending burning, debris raining down. Screams echoed through the narrow streets mixed with the sharp crack of rifle fire. From the shadows emerged human fighters, men, women, even children, fierce and wild-eyed. Some wielded laser pistols cobbled together from salvage tech. Others brandished crude blades sharpened on rusted metal. Kael'thar watched in horror as a small human child, no older than 8, lobbed a homemade grenade into a Vorin patrol. The explosion tore through armor and bone alike. The child didn't flinch, only shouting a war cry as she disappeared behind a crumbling wall. "They fight like animals," whispered one of Kael'thar's soldiers, voice trembling. "Animals." "With fire," Kael'thar replied grimly. "And they burn hotter than any star we've seen." The siege stretched on for weeks. Human fighters launched hit-and-run attacks, using tunnels and sewer systems to outmaneuver the Vorin. They set traps that turned entire streets into killing fields. Booby-trapped corpses rigged to explode. Fires set to create smoke screens thick enough to blind even the most advanced sensors. But it wasn't just the weapons that made the siege hellish. It was the human will to fight. Civilians joined the resistance, tearing down walls to create barricades, digging trenches in their own streets. Their hatred was palpable, an energy that pushed them to unimaginable extremes. Kael'thar recalled the bitter taste of despair as he watched an elderly woman toss a Molotov cocktail at a Vorin tank. Flames engulfed the vehicle, melting armor plates and forcing the crew to bail out under a hail of gunfire. "They do not surrender," Kael'thar said bitterly. "They do not negotiate. They fight until the last breath." One night, during a lull in the fighting, Kael'thar found himself in the ruins of a burned-out schoolhouse. There, amidst the rubble, he saw a small shrine, a collection of human trinkets, faded photographs, and makeshift weapons arranged with care. It struck him then. This was not just a war for land or power. It was a war for survival, for memory, for something deeply personal. The next morning, the humans launched a desperate counterattack. Kael'thar's squad was caught off guard as dozens of human fighters poured from hidden tunnels, armed with flamethrowers and improvised rocket launchers. The street became a furnace of fire and smoke, bodies burning alive in the chaos. Kael'thar found himself face to face with a man, grizzled, scarred, eyes blazing with fury. They fought hand to hand amidst the flames, Kael'thar's rifle, crashing against a metal pipe while the human clawed and bit with savage desperation. When the man finally collapsed, Kael'thar glimpsed something in his eyes. Not hatred, but a fierce, desperate hope. A hope that their savage war would one day be over. But for Kael'thar, the war was only deepening. The siege of Karthos Prime became a grinding testament to human ferocity. Each day brought new horrors, massive explosions, fires that turned night into day, and the ever-present cries of the wounded and dying. Kael'thar's unit lost many good warriors in that hellish city, yet every fallen soldier was replaced by another human fighter, as if the entire population was one living, breathing weapon of vengeance. The Vorin command finally ordered a retreat, their forces too battered and broken to continue the assault. Karthos Prime remained unyielding, a burning ember refusing to die. Kael'thar's voice trembled as he finished the story. They fought with everything they had, because for them, surrender was death, and death was not an option. The alien, soldiers around the fire were silent, the weight of his words sinking deep. The savage heart of humanity had revealed itself. The shattered city of Carthos Prime lay beneath the darkening sky like a corpse stripped bare. Smoke spiraled from countless fires, mingling with the acrid stench of burning fuel and scorched metal. What had once been a thriving metropolis was now a twisted skeleton of rubble and ruin, the battlefield where humanity's savage will met the unstoppable might of the Voran war machine. Kael'thar's unit marched through the ruined streets with grim determination. They were no longer invading foreign ground. This was the humans' last stand on their homeworld, and the desperation in the air was suffocating. The Voran High Command expected an easy siege. With their overwhelming firepower and numbers, they assumed the humans would crumble swiftly. But the humans had other plans. From the shadows of collapsed buildings behind shattered walls and smoldering cars, human fighters struck with lethal precision. They did not hesitate. Every man, woman, and child who could wield a weapon had taken up arms. Some carried scavenged laser rifles. Others wielded whatever they could find, a length of rebar sharpened to a point, a homemade grenade, a stolen... Blade Kael'thar's squad entered the district known as New Barris, a maze of crumbled tenements and twisted steel. The silence was deceptive. It hung thick and heavy, broken suddenly by the shrill whistle of a human scout. The attack came swiftly. Humans poured from hidden tunnels and broken basements, firing with desperate fury. One soldier fell as a grenade detonated at his feet, sending fragments tearing through his armor. Kael'thar barely dove behind the charred remains of a car before the explosion swallowed the street. They fought in the ruins like animals cornered, moving swiftly between cover, striking and melting back into shadows. It was a deadly dance of survival. Amid the chaos, Kael'thar spotted an old man, stooped and trembling, hurling a Molotov cocktail at a Voran battle tank. The flames licked hungrily at the metal beast, and though the crew managed to escape, the damage slowed its advance. This is no longer a war for territory, Kael'thar muttered grimly to himself. It's a war for survival, every inch, paid in blood. As days bled into nights, the siege hardened into a grueling stalemate. The humans, with their intimate knowledge of the city's underbelly, launched relentless guerrilla strikes. They rigged abandoned buildings with explosives, turning Voran advances into deadly traps. Streets became minefields. Every corner might conceal a sniper or a squad waiting to ambush. Kael'thar saw firsthand the ferocity of human will. He watched a young woman, barely out of her teens, cover a retreating group of Voran with a salvaged plasma rifle. Her hands shook, but her eyes burned with fury. When the enemy closed in, she charged with nothing but a jagged blade, taking down 2 soldiers before falling. It was this savage courage that broke the morale of many Voran troops. One night, while patrolling the ruins, Kael'thar stumbled upon a hidden shrine in a bombed-out school. Amongst the rubble were faded photographs, tattered books, and small trinkets, memories of a world before war. The sight stirred something unexpected in Kael'thar, a deep, aching respect for these savage survivors who clung to their humanity amid the ruins. The following dawn brought a sudden, brutal counterattack. Human forces surged out of underground tunnels, wielding makeshift flamethrowers and rocket launchers cobbled together from scrap. The street ignited in a hellish inferno, screams mixing with the roar of fire and explosions. Kael'thar found himself fighting hand-to-hand in the burning rubble, locked in a desperate struggle with a scarred human warrior, whose eyes held not hate, but a desperate hope. When the fight ended, Kael'thar was left staring at a body burned and broken, but alive, clutching a small emblem, a symbol of a shattered humanity refusing to die. Despite their losses, the humans would not yield. Their savage defense turned the siege into a grinding war of attrition. Voran forces found themselves stretched thin, every step forward met with fierce resistance. Finally, the High Command ordered a retreat. Kael'thar's unit pulled back, battered and broken, leaving behind the burning ruins of Carthos Prime and the echoes of a people who fought not for conquest, but for their very survival. As they departed, Kael'thar's voice was low, filled with a mixture of awe and dread. They are not merely warriors. They are the embodiment of survival itself. To defeat them, we would have to destroy more than cities. We would have to destroy their will. And Kael'thar knew, with bitter certainty, that war with humanity was far from over. Kael'thar's memories were haunted by the specters of the fallen, both Vorin and human. The war had carved deep trenches not just in the soil, but in his mind, each battle a fresh wound that refused to heal. After the brutal retreat from Carthos, Prime, the Vorin regrouped on a barren outpost on the edge of human space. Here the war's cold calculations met the brutal reality of humanity's indomitable spirit. Kael'thar was restless, haunted by the screams, the smoke, and the faces of those who had fallen. Every night, the ghosts of the jungle, the ruins, the siege whispered in his ears. The commanders planned their next move, a strike at the human homeworld's most fortified colony, the mining city of Vraxos. Intelligence reported it was vital to humanity's war effort, a hub for resources and munitions. The assault was brutal from the start. The Vraxos mines sprawled beneath the surface, a twisting labyrinth of tunnels and caverns. The humans defended them fiercely, their desperation palpable. Kael'thar's squad descended into the darkness, their armor rattling softly against the rocky walls. Inside, the humans fought not just with weapons, but with cunning traps and savage tactics. Walls collapsed, choking dust blinded, and hidden flamethrowers turned tunnels into ovens of flame. Kael'thar could hear the ragged breaths of his comrades, the clash of metal, the stifled cries of the wounded. In the black silence, every shadow could hide death. Suddenly, a shriek echoed down a narrow corridor, a sound not quite human, not quite beast. Kael'thar's heart thundered. Ahead, a group of human fighters charged, their faces streaked with grime and firelight, wielding axes and jagged blades. They fought with a ferocity born of fear and fury, pushing the Vorin back step by agonizing step. Amidst the chaos, Kael'thar's gaze locked on a figure who moved like a phantom, a woman, her eyes wild, hair tangled, covered in scars. She led the charge, a whirlwind of violence slashing through Vorin armor and tearing flesh with bare hands when her blade shattered. Kael'thar barely dodged her final strike, his breath caught in his throat as she vanished into the darkness. The battle for Vraxos stretched on for days, each moment a brutal test of endurance and willpower. Kael'thar watched as his squad mates fell one by one, sacrificed in a desperate attempt to breach the heart of the mine. But the humans refused to yield. Their screams echoed through the tunnels, a terrifying symphony of rage and sorrow. In a moment of grim clarity, Kael'thar realized the true nature of this enemy. They fought not for glory or conquest, but because every inch of ground was a sanctuary for their survival, every breath a stolen gift. When the Vorin finally seized control of the mine, it was a hollow victory. The cost was staggering, the scars on Kael'thar's mind deeper than any wound on his body. He sat alone in the ruined control room, surrounded by flickering consoles and shattered screens. Outside, the dust settled on a battlefield drenched in blood and broken dreams. Kael'thar's thoughts drifted to the faces he had seen, those wild eyes burning with the desperate fire of a people who would never surrender. His voice was a whisper, as he told his comrades, "This war is not just fought with weapons, it is fought in the soul." And in that silence, the ghosts of humanity's savage wars whispered back. Kael'thar's body ached in the quiet moments between battles, but it was his mind that was truly battered. The relentless savagery of humanity had worn away at his faith in victory. Yet, the war demanded he press on. The next operation was to strike deep into human-controlled space, a bold assault on the asteroid fortress of Cronus V. It was a jewel of human engineering, carved from rock and steel, and home to a critical weapons manufacturing facility. As the Vorin fleet descended, on Cronus V, the cold void of space seemed almost merciful compared to the hell awaiting them inside the fortress. Kael'thar's drop pod slammed into the surface, sending shards of rock skittering. He emerged into a world of shattered metal and eerie silence. The fortress was a maze of corridors, echoing chambers and ominous shadows. Their mission: breach the heart of the weapons facility and cripple humanity's war machine. But the humans were waiting. From the dim corridors burst defenders, moving with practiced brutality. They fought in tight squads, their voices low but fierce, communicating in rapid bursts. Kael'thar recognized the signs, trained, ruthless, but driven by a savage, unyielding purpose. The air filled with the sharp crackle of plasma fire and the grinding roar of mechanized exoskeletons. Kael'thar's squad pressed forward, exchanging fire and flesh in a deadly dance. Each corridor was a killing ground, every doorway a gauntlet. In one brutal skirmish, Kael'thar was separated from his unit. Alone and wounded, he navigated the labyrinthian halls, the distant echoes of battle his only guide. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every corner might conceal death. Then he saw her, the woman from the mines, the phantom leader. She stood in the flickering light of a shattered control room, eyes blazing with fierce intelligence and unrelenting fury. Without hesitation, she charged, weapon raised. Kael'thar dodged, parried, their weapons clashing in a symphony of violence. She fought not with the cold precision of a trained soldier, but with the raw, brutal energy of a cornered beast. "You don't understand," she hissed between strikes. "This is our home. Our blood is here." Kael'thar countered, "And your fury is your strength, but it blinds you." Their battle was a storm of rage and desperation, echoing the war itself. For every strike Kael'thar made, she answered with ferocity. Yet beneath the clash of steel and plasma was a grudging respect growing. Two warriors bound by the cruelty of war. As the fight reached its climax, alarms blared, reinforcements incoming. The woman snarled, retreating into the shadows with a final glance of fierce challenge. Kael'thar pressed on, his body screaming with exhaustion and pain. He reached the weapons core, planting charges that would cripple the facility. As the timers ticked down, he sent a final message to the Voran fleet: victory, but at a cost. The explosion rocked Cronus 5, shaking the asteroid and lighting the void with fiery death. Kael'thar watched from a safe distance as the fortress burned, knowing the humans would rebuild and fight on. The war was far from over. Later, Kael'thar stood among his battered comrades, their faces etched with weariness and hard-earned pride. Yet none spoke of glory, only survival, loss, and the harsh truth that they faced an enemy unlike any other. Kael'thar's voice was low, heavy with the weight of what he'd seen. They fight not because they want to die, but because they refuse to be broken. Around the smoldering remains of Cronus 5, the soldiers understood that the true battle was not over technology or territory. It was for the soul of humanity itself. The Voran forces, battered but unyielding, regrouped in the cold expanse of space, orbiting the shattered remains of Cronus 5. Yet Kael'thar's thoughts remained grounded on the indomitable human spirit, the force behind the savage wars he had witnessed. The next phase of the campaign was unlike any before, a covert mission deep within the human core world, Earth itself. The command saw it as a chance to strike a decisive blow, shattering humanity's heart and forcing a surrender. But for Kael'thar, the mission felt like a descent into an abyss. Under the cloak of darkness, Kael'thar and a small elite squad deployed in stealth pods, piercing the planet's atmosphere with ghost-like silence. Their objective was the city of New Alexandria, a sprawling metropolis rumored to harbor the last of humanity's organized resistance. As they moved through the ruined streets, the scars of war were everywhere: collapsed skyscrapers, burned out vehicles, and the eerie silence of a city that had seen too much death. Yet beneath the rubble, life pulsed with stubborn defiance. Humans moved in small groups, hiding in tunnels, basements, and makeshift shelters. They fought with what they had: improvised weapons, guerrilla tactics, and a relentless will to survive. Kael'thar's squad was met not by organized armies, but by the faces of desperation and rage. In the shadowed alleys, Kael'thar encountered a young human woman named Mira, a fierce fighter whose eyes told stories of loss and unyielding hope. She led a small band of survivors, and despite her youth, she carried the weight of leadership with quiet strength. "You don't belong here," she said, voice sharp but not without curiosity. Kael'thar responded with respect. "Neither do you, but we are both trapped by this war." Their brief exchange was cut short as human fighters launched an ambush. The battle was brutal. Shouts and gunfire echoed through the broken streets. Kael'thar fought with measured fury, every movement, precise but wary of the humans' savage unpredictability. Amidst the firefight, Kael'thar found himself face-to-face with Mira again. Their weapons locked in deadly contest, and for a moment time seemed to freeze. In her eyes he saw not hatred but a fierce determination to protect what little remained of her world. They broke apart when reinforcements arrived, but the encounter lingered in Kael'thar's mind like a ghost. As the mission progressed, Kael'thar's squad uncovered evidence of humanity's unyielding resistance. Messages scrawled on walls, stories of sacrifice passed between survivors, and symbols of hope etched into the ruins. The humans were fighting not for victory, but for survival, for the memory of their fallen, for the chance to rebuild from the ashes. Kael'thar reported, back to his commanders, his voice heavy with reluctant admiration. "They do not fight as conquerors or conquereds. They fight as a people bound by the scars of war and the refusal to be broken." The mission ended with a tactical withdrawal, the squad escaping Earth's shattered surface under fire. But Kael'thar's perspective had shifted. He no longer saw humanity as mere barbarians. They were survivors, forged in the crucible of endless conflict, their savage wars a testament to an unyielding will. As the Voran fleet set course for the next battlefield, Kael'thar stood on the observation deck staring out into the stars. The war had cost him much, friends, faith, and innocence, but it had also revealed a truth he could no longer deny. The savage wars of humanity were not just tales of blood and fire. They were stories of defiance, resilience, and the unbreakable spirit of a species that refused to fade into the void. The war had stretched for years, each campaign carving deeper scars into the flesh of the galaxy. Kael'thar, once a confident soldier of the Voran Empire, now carried the weight of countless battles, not just on his body, but in his soul, as the fleet approached the human homeworld once more. A fragile ceasefire was declared. Both sides were exhausted, their forces depleted, their will tested beyond measure. Kael'thar found himself summoned to the Voran High Command, where strategy and politics wove a tangled web. Yet amidst the cold calculations, a quiet conversation awaited him, a chance to reflect on what he had witnessed and learned. In the sterile command chamber, Kael'thar faced the council elders, their faces etched with concern and curiosity. "You have seen the enemy up close," one elder began. "What have we learned from these savage wars?" Kael'thar's voice was steady, filled with hard-won wisdom. "Humanity fights not as mere conquerors or victims, but as survivors. Their wars are brutal because they must be. They are forged by loss, desperation, and an unyielding desire to endure." He paused, the memories flashing behind his eyes. The jungle ambushes, the burning cities, the flicker of hope in shattered eyes. They do not fear death as we do. They embrace it, not as an end, but as a crucible. Each battle they fight is a story of defiance, a testament to the strength of their spirit. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. Kael'thar continued, "To defeat them, we must understand them. Not just their weapons or tactics, but the fire that burns within." The council was silent, the weight of his words settling like dust in the room. Later, Kael'thar stood alone, gazing out at the stars through the viewport. The war had changed him. The savage tales he had once dismissed as barbarism now echoed, as lessons in resilience and humanity's fierce refusal to be broken. He thought of Mira, the fierce young woman who had stood against impossible odds, of the girl in the jungle whose dagger had held the weight of an entire people's survival, of every human soul who had fought with savage fury for a chance to live. The ceasefire held tenuously, a fragile thread woven through the vast darkness. Both sides weary, they faced a choice: endless war or the possibility of peace. Kael'thar knew that peace would require more than treaties and diplomacy. It would demand understanding of strength, sacrifice, and the savage wars that had shaped humanity. As the first rays of a distant sun pierced the void, Kael'thar whispered to himself, "Their story is not just one of war. It is the story of survival against all odds. And in that, there is hope." The galaxy held its breath, poised on the edge of a new dawn. The savage wars were over, but the legacy they left behind would burn forever in the hearts of those who fought, and in the stars that watched silently over them all.